Hey guys, welcome to Talking the Talkies. I'm Peter Waters, and welcome to my latest review where I will be talking about two movies today. One is Cruella, which is the recent Disney live action version of one of their beloved or maybe hated animated characters, Cruella de Vil. And the second movie will be A Quiet Place Part 2. The much anticipated horror sequel. So first up is Cruella. Now, when I first heard about this project, I have to admit I was a little bit skeptical. Although we have had Disney take their villains and make standalone projects with them before, like in Maleficent, I feel like we all maybe thought Cruella was maybe a bridge too far. After all, she is a character known for literally murdering puppies in order to make fashion accessories. I was curious to see how they would take this diabolical character and turn her into the protagonist of a conceivably family Disney film. Would this be like the Joker for, ages 6 and up? So I'm happy to report that Cruella ultimately does sort of pull off the Disney villain as protagonist movie. While it doesn't go so far as to have Joker levels of evil in it, Cruella herself has some anti-hero qualities, but it's more out of circumstance that happens. So the writers definitely tweaked around her story to make her a little bit more likable. And the way they reframe the story around her killing puppies, spoiler alert, they don't actually go that route. There's no way they could have done that. They sort of almost make it out to be like her reputation would make her seem like she did that, and those stories of her killing puppies is maybe a case of yellow journalism. It was probably the only direction they could have taken it, but that being said, her character is very interesting in the whole Disney universe canon. She surprisingly, even though Disney has outlawed the use of cigarette usage in their films, she does actually drink in the movie. She does commit criminal activities. And she is like sort of this punk rock Disney character, which I thought was really interesting. And speaking of punk rock, the soundtrack on this movie is incredible. If you look up the soundtrack, there's too many names to list here, but it's pretty much wall-to-wall classics. Everyone from The Doors, to the Rolling Stones, to Electric Light Orchestra, to Nina Simone, to Ike and Tina Turner. It's like a ridiculous amount of money had to have been spent on the soundtrack. At times, there's so many needle drops, one after the other, it feels almost like Disney's version of a Quentin Tarantino film. And I really like what Emma Stone did with the character to make her likable. She's pretty much plays Cruella as this wannabe fashion designer. She has a lot of talent and ambition, but she starts off the movie and she becomes an orphan, and she's in London, and she is basically sort of sneaking her way up the ladder. And eventually she gains the attention of another Emma Thompson, who sort of plays the devil, if this is a Devil Wears Prada type movie. She's definitely the sort of snooty, bossy character who looks down on everyone, but she recognizes some talent in Cruella, so she allows her to stay on. But as you might imagine, the two start to form a rivalry, and that's sort of where her Cruella persona develops from. And it happens really organically, and it's a lot of fun to see her transformation from this sort of spunky, rebellious young orphan into this fashion icon, almost out of spite over her boss, which I thought was fun. But in addition to the acting, which was great from everyone involved, to the soundtrack, probably the number one standout thing about this movie, honestly, was the costume design. If this movie is not nominated at the Oscars for the costume design, something went wrong. In fact, I believe this has to be one of the front runners to win the category. Every costume worn in this movie is incredible, especially once Cruella gets into her sort of evil persona and her costumes start representing her rebellious spirit, and she's constantly trying to upstage her boss with increasingly elaborate costumes. It is incredible, some of the costumes pulled off in here, and I have to commend the entire team responsible for that. So overall, I really enjoyed Cruella. It might be too long for children, young children, to enjoy, and I think it definitely caters to some of the older audiences, maybe the teenagers who still like Disney. And I really appreciate how Disney took this character that you wouldn't think would make for a good protagonist, and you end up rooting for her throughout the film. They definitely lucked out with the director, Craig Gillespie, who directed 2 other movies that took, on the page, seemingly unlikable characters and made them like really likable. Both Lars and the Real Girl, where he took Ryan Gosling in love with an inanimate girl doll and made that somehow both believable and you really care about him. And also he directed I, Tonya, which completely changed my mind about the notorious ice skater who may or may not have hired people to break the kneecaps of her competition during the Olympics. So I really enjoyed this movie's snarky attitude, which is maybe not super common for Disney movies. I liked its style, I liked the music, it was an overall entertaining time. I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I recommend it. Alright, and that brings us to the second review, A Quiet Place Part 2. Now this is the sequel to the 2018 horror movie that was a massive success that no one really saw coming, especially as directed and starring Jim from The Office himself, John Krasinski. On a $17 million budget, this relatively small budgeted horror film made somewhere in the ballpark of $340 million, which is incredible. So not only was this movie a massive financial success, but it also made tons of end of the year best of lists, from AFI naming it one of the 10 best movies of the year. It was Oscar nominated for its sound design. Emily Blunt won a Screen Actors Guild Award for her incredible performance in the movie, especially as she needs to keep quiet while giving birth in the film because the aliens might hear her, and she really knocked it out of the park. So I was really anxiously awaiting the sequel to this movie. It was supposed to come out in March of 2020, but it was delayed multiple times because of COVID. It was supposed to come out right when the coronavirus hit. And so they've continually delayed it, and it's been over a year since the original release date. I don't want to go too much into the movie. The basic plot is that the family now has to evacuate from the farmhouse that was the main setting of the first film, and essentially they are going out into the world and trying to, survive. But part 2 does everything a great sequel should do. It sort of takes what made the first one great and just expands that world. It still has that same creepy atmosphere where everyone has to keep quiet so the monsters don't hear them. There's some really amazing, suspenseful set pieces here that would probably make Hitchcock proud. And the performances across the board continue to be amazing. Emily Blunt and Millicent Simmons, who is actually deaf in real life, is amazing, and the movie sort of more or less centers on her story. Noah Jupe also is great as the younger son in the movie. And then as another additional cast member is added, Cillian Murphy also plays a new character in the film, which I won't spoil, but he is also likewise really good. All the characters feel fleshed out. They all have their own individual beats, and no one really feels short-shrifted. It's impressive to me that with both A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2, that so much of the movie is silent, and probably something around 90% of the dialogue in this film is all done through American Sign Language, which is really incredible that the movie could actually go on to be successful. Most audiences will outright refuse to watch foreign films on the pure fact that they don't want to read while watching a movie. And yet A Quiet Place went on to this great level of success, and it essentially is kind of like a foreign language film unless you can read American Sign Language. So it is an incredible achievement in that regard as well. The only thing about both A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2 that leaves me scratching my head, maybe a little too much, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I'm really not sure why the aliens are attacking. Now, these movies are rated PG-13, so maybe it's inferred that the aliens are eating the humans. They do have sharp teeth, but we never see that, and we only see them thrashing the humans after they make even the tiniest noise. They can't see, they can only hear, so they run after humans at the tiniest little noise. But they only go after humans after hearing that noise. They don't run after each other, even though they make clicking noises, and they don't go after sort of natural phenomenon like you would think they would all gather at like a waterfall, for example, like trying to attack the sound there. So it's a little unclear exactly what makes these aliens tick, but maybe I'm thinking about it too much. If you just turn your brain off and just think that this is some miscellaneous threat, then you'll probably have a great time at the movies. It's very suspenseful. It totally works as a horror film. I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a great movie. So there you have it. 2 really great movies now playing in theaters. I would highly recommend, if you can do so safely, to check these movies out in theaters because they're, the last year they've taken a huge hit, so the more tickets they sell, the better they can do, and I really hope that the theaters survive into the future. It's basically like my religion is going to the movie theater every week, so I highly recommend either one of these movies. If they interest you at all, I recommend you see them. So on that note, I just want to say thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.